What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Eddie Hearn, Moses Atoma, Dillian Whyte. Get this, Eddie Hearn admits he found it hard to watch as Dillian Whyte gets evaporated by Moses Atoma. Damn. Eddie Hearn also said the inactivity and age left Whyte vulnerable. He said that was the worst matchup for him with no activity. I feel like that was always going to happen. And it was hard to watch, and I hated a fellow colleague go out in that manner. And those are the words of Eddie Hearn, and let me counterpunch. I think if it was hard to watch, I think he should encourage Dillian Whyte to go back in there and win a more winnable fight. Not a guy that may be the next Mike Tyson, not a guy that's knocking everybody out, giving them the blues and nightmares in sparring, not a guy like Moses Atoma. How about somebody else? How about Philip Hrgovic? How about Joseph Parker? Because remember, Joseph Parker was that guy that was a possible opponent for Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte didn't want that. He wanted the smoke, okay? And he got what he was asking for, and I can understand, Dillian Whyte and Eddie Hearn, because, they have a relationship. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, but nonetheless, it is one. He knows Dillian quite well, and I can understand him feeling that way. And I would employ him again, get him in there with somebody that he can beat. Somebody, a winnable fight, a fight that that looks good. What about Joe Joyce? I think Joe Joyce and Dillian Whyte at this point would be a good fight. I wouldn't want Dillian Whyte to go out like that. I know he made some money. I don't know how much money, but he's made some, okay? And I think that it's important to go out, and it's important for your mental health, for your own career standards as a prize fighter, because he's not finished after this. If he quits after this, I think it will be worse on his psyche than anything else. Quitting after this type of defeat, nah, that's not good for your mental health, man. You'll think about that. You'll sit on the side of the bed, in deep thought about that shit. Because I know I would. That would bother me if I know I didn't give it all I could have gave. Not really going out on my shield. The referee waving the fight off like that, even when you think it was a foul that initiated that, or you thought it was an early stoppage, whichever you think. It's not a good way to go out of the sport. And I would recommend, if I'm Eddie Hearn, getting them back in there with somebody else. Get him back in there with somebody that's less dangerous, somebody that's more on Dillian Whyte's level, okay? This is how I look at boxing. First of all, shout out to everybody that came to my latest live stream earlier today. I think we need to match these fighters up equally, okay? And what I mean by that is we shouldn't have a Mike Tyson versus a Jake Paul. We shouldn't have a Dillian Whyte versus a Moses Atoma. We should have fighters that are in the same age bracket, that are competitive, that are rivals. Honest rivals to each other, because they're in the same age, because they're competitive, because they have a lot to lose and gain. Because what we're seeing here, we're seeing that Moses Atoma, we don't want to get him in a trend of whooping old fighters. And I think that's what Tyson Fury, speaking of what he said earlier, he says AJ, Miller, Zhang, Usyk, they all get it from Moses, right? I think he's honestly trying to advocate the idea of Moses taking on those guys. You know what I mean? And some of those guys he never fought, quiet, kept. But I think he's trying to advocate that just to pad Moses's resume. And I don't think that's cool. I think Moses needs a nice balanced career. I think he needs to be in there with faster fighters, seasoned fighters, as well as younger fighters, because that's what gives you a well-rounded resume, instead of padding your resume full of guys that used to be somebody back in the day. You know what I mean? And they're not really up to your standards or up to your opposition now because they're past their prime. I don't think that's cool. You know what I mean? So I do think, saying all that to say this, I think Dillian Whyte should fight someone around his own age, mid-30s to late 30s. You know, give it a go. Derek Chisora, Philip Hergovic, Joe Joyce, guys like that. Hell, even AJ, who knows? But guys in the same age bracket, damn it, that's what we need to see. But you guys tell me what you think of Eddie Hearn stating that it was a bad thing. It was painful to see Dillian Whyte get evaporated. Damn, he didn't have to use those words, but evaporated like he did by the hands of Moses Atoma. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.